Now, how do we tell your story? How do we tell a story of you actually showing that teamwork, compassion, and communication, interacting with a patient? Application Renovation Season 2, Episode 1. Thank you so much for joining me on Application Renovation. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I am doing excellent. I'm excited to take a look at your application and hopefully give you some feedback that will help you improve your application for next time and get you in to medical school. Sound good?
Absolutely.
All right, before we jump in, I want to hear from you kind of what your overarching thought was with the application. First of all, like, did you get any interviews? And if you didn't, or even if you did, what do you think was the biggest weakness in your application?
So first, I did not get any interviews,
Okay.
which is a little bit of a bummer, but I think I went into the whole application process very new and very unknowing of what was going to be going on. I'm very inexperienced in the midst of it, and I didn't have a whole lot of guidance as I was going through it. So I think just very, very inexperienced, and I think one of the biggest issues or red flags, I guess, there's obviously my Mcat score. And then there was some institutional action plays. So those are two kind of red flags that certainly didn't help my application.
Okay. All right, well, good. And I've looked at your application. I would probably agree with that assessment. So we're gonna jump through your application now. You won't be able to see what I'm looking at, but I'll talk through it and really give you a sense of what's going on. And then really too, I think compared to season 1, where there was a lot of back and forth about each section, I'm gonna dive through some of the big things that I thought were issues, and then I'll circle back around to you to see what your thoughts are about that and really get any final questions.
Absolutely.
Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the application. And I've already marked up some stuff. So really just right off the bat, one of the biggest questions that I have is, when did you actually submit your application? And you submitted early, right? June 1st, and it was processed on the 17th. So it's one of the things that I always harp on for students, that getting your application in early is good. Obviously, it still took more than 2 weeks for your application to be processed and verified. So outside of that, we go down. We've de-identified a ton of your stuff here, which is good. And the first thing that we really get to is the institutional action. And obviously that's going to be a flag for some schools. Some schools may have a filter that says, hey, we don't want to see any students that have institutional actions. It's just not worth our time. We don't care if it was something silly, right? Most of the most common ones are underage drinking, right? Someone was cited for underage drinking at school, at a football game, wherever. And so that's always something on there. It's just an easy filter for schools. I think you did a really good job of explaining your institutional action, kind of what you learned from it. You owned up to it, which is all great stuff. So that's a really good example of an institutional action kind of explanation. So great job with that.
Wow, okay, good.
All right, and then we go down looking through your grades, the C in biochemistry, welcome to the club. Other than that, your GPA is pretty stellar, right? 398 for all other non-science GPA, the 368 for science GPA, 381 for your cumulative GPA, which is great. You mentioned your Mcat score as potentially one of your weaknesses, and I would agree, right? A 500 is just like that cutoff of should I maybe apply, should I not apply? Is the rest of my application potentially good? 500 is a very easy screening level for some schools, although I think some schools are creeping up to that 502, 503 range now as scores are creeping up as well. One of the bigger red flags for me potentially with your Mcat score is the fact that your 2 lowest scores are in the sciences, right? Which for a lot of students it's the reverse. The lower scores are in cars and psych-soc because they studied sciences, that they have a real strong foundation with that.
Yeah.
I see your earlier Mcat score 494, so you obviously improved. that score tells me potentially, obviously without hearing the whole backstory, was you just took the test completely unprepared. Maybe. And we'll talk about that. And then we get down into the experiences. And the first thing that I notice is the bullet pointed descriptions. I am not a fan of bullet point descriptions. Your goal with your application is to tell a story. And when you bullet point your descriptions, all you're doing is listing off jobs, right? I did this, I did this, I did this. You're not able to tell a story when it comes to your impact on that position's impact on you. And so where I think this application potentially falls down is stellar GPA, weak Mcat score, right? Average, right? If you want to look at true like averages of what an Mcat score is. So right at the average of all test takers, where can you potentially shine? And you shine in your story, right? My shirt, right? Your story matters is something that I harp on all the time. And when you bullet point a list like this, it just doesn't give the reviewer an opportunity. So looking at your application again, you have a ton of hours, which is great as an EMT over the course of a couple years, right? So one of the things that I always talk about is, okay, you say, respond to emergency situations quickly and safely. Well, sure, that's what an EMT does, right? At some point, as students are looking at, and I'm talking more to everyone else right now, but as students are looking at this and thinking about, what do I want to write? If you are sitting there writing and you can read back and go, well, will a normal person, and these aren't normal people reading this, right? These are physicians and faculty members, people around healthcare, around medical students. Will they understand what an EMT does? And if the answer is, yeah, they understand what an EMT does. They understand that I respond to emergency situations quickly and safely, that I demonstrate high standards of performance, including teamwork, communication, and compassion, right? Yes, right? That's what an EMT does. Now, how do we tell your story? How do we tell a story of you actually showing that teamwork, compassion, and communication, interacting with a patient? Okay. And that's where you get into the story and how it really helps. So looking at your application, right, you say, each shift affords me the opportunity to work with different doctors, all of whom have their own finesse to practice medicine. Yes, obviously, right? Of course, right? So as students are reviewing their application and really critiquing each part, go sentence by sentence. Is this just a generic statement, or is this really adding to my story? And I would say that that's just a generic statement. It's true, great, but it doesn't add to your story. Right? I capitalize on every second to learn and refine new skills. So at some point you get into the sales pitch of, look at me, like I'm a go-getter. I love doing this. I'm gonna study all the time, and I'm gonna refine my skills all the time. You won't have to worry about me putting in my full effort. Right? You get into that little sales pitch is what students try to do. All right, back to the application. The next one that comes up is your volunteer EMT before or kind of during the other one as well. And it's just a really short description, right? You have 700 characters on AMCAS. Use it, tell a story. Okay. So it's just a wasted opportunity, potentially. The total hours for this NCAA DoD concussion research, I marked as a question mark, like 4,000 hours over the course of 3 years is doable, right? If it's your full-time job, it's doable. It just was a lot of hours. The question that I come down to for this, again, is number one, bullet points, right? So there's no storytelling. And then again, why was this important to you? And so obviously concussion seems like it's important to you because of your experience with concussion, I think, if I remember from your story. And the way that you kind of explain it, as I'll circle some of these here, and I've already marked them, right? I'm infatuated with the mystery of the brain. That's just another fancy way of saying I like science, right? Deep desire to serve others who serve. That's another fancy way of saying I want to help people. right? I've seen 1,000 different ways that students are able to squeeze in, I like science and I want to help people, right? So super cliched things that don't really help me understand who you are, why this experience was helpful. If you were able to say, hey, there was one research participant, Sally, who had really severe concussion symptoms, and we were able to walk her through XYZ and get her to a place where she was able to live her life, or whatever, right? Whatever the research was about and what you were doing day in and day out, that shows me that you have compassion and empathy to serve other people, right? So use the story to show all of that stuff. Don't just say, I have a deep desire to serve others who serve.
Okay.
Make sense? Right, so again, kind of the cliche things of investigative mindset, passionate curiosity, I like to learn, right? Students get into this mindset of, I need to prove that I'm a lifelong learner, I really like science, I'm gonna study really hard, and that's just not the goal of the application.
Okay.
And as we go through kind of season 2 with more episodes, kind of knowing the other applications that I have, students will see this kind of trend of that sales pitch going on and on and on in applications. And you'll see, like, if I were a medical school seeing these applications, I'm like, well, how do I separate? They're all saying they like to learn. They're all saying that they're compassionate and dedicated and motivated. It's your story that really will set you apart. Okay. And then looking through some other ones, again, the bullet point stuff. So you have the Latino Student Union. I was responsible for the following, right? That just screams, here's my job duty list, which is not the point of this. The waitress experience. So you'd be surprised, right? Students, and I have another example in a couple episodes, students tend to maybe overestimate hours. And so you have your waitress experience here that was 13 months long, according to the dates, 2,500 hours. That's 56 weeks, roughly, at 45 hours per week. Maybe you worked that much. Did you? Do you think?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Then that's fine. It's a lot of hours, right?
Yeah.
So that just stands out as, is that real? Is it not? But that's okay. This is a very common one for being a waitress, right? My duties included waiting on tables. Well, of course, you were a waitress, or a server, right? Is the more PC way of saying it. Working to ensure customers' desires and orders were fulfilled in a timely fashion and upholding the highest quality, right? Again, that's what a server does. You don't need to explain that. Tell me a story of like your most memorable customer, right? That would be cool.
Okay.
That would be memorable.
Like the fact that people showed up to my graduation because...
Exactly. Yeah. All right. And then a big one here that stands out as a red flag is the volunteer abroad in Ecuador. You have labeled here, it's 3 months, 1,800 hours, so a lot of hours. I didn't do the math on what that actually looks like. If you're just like 24 hours times 3 months, which maybe you did that. I don't recommend doing that because obviously you're sleeping during some of that time, I would hope. If you're still alive, you would have had to sleep. But you listed as medical clinical, and the first line says, I worked as an English teacher. And so right off the bat, I'm like, okay, that's not medical clinical. I'm going to subtract 1,800 hours from your list. So just be very careful as you're going through your list, how you're classifying things and what you're focusing on in the description. Maybe you did a ton of medical clinical type related experiences while you were there. Great, list that as clinical experience, but take the actual hours that you did clinical experience and separate that out. And then maybe you have another experience underneath that is the same kind of location, contact information, but now you talk about being an English teacher. Right? And you have those hours separate.
That makes sense.
So it seems like you're cheating a little bit here by saying, I was an English teacher first and foremost. Here's all my total hours, but I'm going to label it medical clinical because I need those hours too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Physician shadowing is something that hasn't come up on your application yet. You have it here from 2013. And so that's a big red flag. Like, if you're saying you want to be a physician, why haven't you shadowed yet? And so you have 100 hours over the course of a couple months, several years, many years ago now. And so it just looks like a checkbox type thing.
Okay.
And I drew a little checkbox on there because of that. And then the Italy and the camp, I don't even know how to say that, but the years look like those are high school years. Is that correct? Yeah. So general rule of thumb, high school stays off of the application. Okay. So it just looks like, oh, you just were struggling to find experiences to put on your application. You stuffed it with some high school experiences.
Okay.
Kind of for other people and for you as well as you're thinking about other your next application cycle, if there's something just like hugely monumental, life-changing, you cured cancer as a sophomore in high school, great, put it on your application, right? Or if there's something where you started a project, you started an organization, you carried that through college and maybe even beyond, great. Put the start date from your true start date in high school, but then it's still right a college experience or anything post high school. All right, and then getting into the personal statement, you are a very good writer, but it gets a little bit too creative at the beginning, right? At some point, it's like, okay, you're showing very well, but it's just a little bit too creative.
Okay.
The story that you're talking about here is medicine and those who practice it will not always be the victor. I don't know why students have this, like, they're like, I need to show the admissions committee that I know I'm not going to be able to save everyone, right? I need to prove that I know that people die. Right? And I have lots of other examples coming up in future episodes where students just continue to do that same thing. Remember that the goal of this is why medicine, not I know that people die. And you have that's kind of your theme for your essay, is this kind of monumental moment that this kind of laid onto you. But it doesn't really set up for why medicine. So your kind of reflection here is, my childhood was preparing me for the unremitting battle with death. Okay, right? I guess in some way we're all battling death in the end. So just something to really remember. Okay? All right. Going back through more of the personal statement, right, heart for service. So again, you're selling yourself on I'm meant to do this, a love of learning, right? You're just hitting all of those same cliches over and over and over again. You write the goal of the personal statement again, why medicine? And you, in your personal statement, say, I have a dream of pursuing a career in medicine. Right? The goal of the personal statement is to show me why. Don't just tell me. Show me why that is the case. So you just kind of skip over the biggest reason for the personal statement and just put it in 5 words, right? Or however many words that is. You have at the part of this paragraph seems like you're trying to explain kind of the break in your path to medicine. I'm assuming it's kind of like a red flag type statement of that how could my passions still serve a purpose when they were overpowered so seamlessly by pain? It seems like you're trying to say, hey, like this happened to me, I took a step away. And so I'm assuming that's what that's there for. Sometimes students get a little bit, again, too creative with that instead of just saying, I had to step away from medicine, right? Don't make people guess at, like, what are you trying to tell me here? The next paragraph is an interesting one. You say, I began to buffer that pain and uncertainty with superficial achievements. I pursued perfection in academics, athletics, and social status. It seems very cliche. You're saying, I was struggling, but I'm still perfect. Right? So that seems a little bit too cliche. Like, it's like, what's your biggest weakness? Oh, I'm a perfectionist, right? So just be careful with that.
Okay.
And then really the rest of it is still, the question is, why medicine? Why medicine? Why medicine? I think at the end of the personal statement, I'm still asking, why are you doing this? I don't know why. again, kind of going through your personal statement, cultivating research skills. Again, you're trying to highlight your strengths, which the personal statement that's not what it's for. Why medicine? Right? Learn that practicing medicine is an unspoken commitment to excellence in service, scholarship, and teamwork. Again, yes, true statement, completely factual, completely generic. Right? Doesn't help me understand why you want to do it. And so, again, just a lot of the same things over and over and over again. Let me see. The last part of it gets a little bit negative, where you talk about your soft heart, your tender heart, right? Having a tender heart is not a quality many doctors deem as a positive trait. That's a negative statement, right? It's not like, oh my God, that's such a bad thing to say, but it's a negative statement. Right? I typically recommend students just stay away from negative statements overall. Right? It doesn't really help me understand. Like, okay, so you're pessimistic about this, and then you try to spin it into saying, well, it's my strength. Again, having a tender heart, okay, right? It can make you weak and make it difficult to see the horrors that often come through the trauma. But I can say with confidence that it is my tender heart molded through the redemptive power of brokenness that confirms I'm meant for being a doctor. So lots of people have tender hearts. Lots of people have been through trauma. Lots of people have experienced what you've experienced. That has nothing to do with confirming that you're supposed to be a doctor, right? Your experiences interacting with patients, interacting with physicians, that is what shows me that you've confirmed that you want to be a physician, not that you have a tender heart, right? There are plenty of careers where having a tender heart is a definite strength. And obviously I can read from this that you are probably going to be a super empathetic physician, but it doesn't mean you should be a physician. It just means maybe you'll be an empathetic one.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, why do you want to be a physician? And then I think we blocked out your residence based on where you live. I'm assuming Colorado resident. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so looking at your school list, I see Florida State, out-of-state public school, Michigan State, out-of-state public school, Oregon, out-of-state public school, California, Colorado's in-state. That's good. California, Iowa, Maryland, all public state out of schools. Your chances at applying to a public state out of school, especially with that 500 MCAT, right? I know almost for certain that Oregon does not look at out-of-state applicants unless they have a 514. Now, don't hold me to that, but that's the feedback that I've gotten from other people. I don't know if they publicly say that. So public out-of-state schools just are typically, in my mind, a waste of money unless you are just a stellar applicant and or you have very specific ties to the state. So if you could say, hey, I'm a Colorado resident, but I was born and raised in Oregon, great. Apply to Oregon, show them that you have specific ties to that state and why you're applying there. But so your school list to me is almost mostly wasted. Baylor is the only private school on there, and it's obviously a super competitive, really good school. And they still, even though they're a private school, I believe, looking at the MSAR data, they still prefer Texas residents. So that is your application in a nutshell. So tell me what you think feedback-wise.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to my inexperience going into this.
Yep.
And it's so good knowing all of this kind of going into round 2 and the new experiences that I've had. And, you know, only one of the schools offered any sort of feedback on my application. And in order to do so, you had to be rejected from everywhere and then do this self-assessment. And so doing this self-assessment that I did it was for Michigan State, really revealed a lot of kind of what you just reaffirmed of those weaknesses in my application and how to better substitute and kind of just make it better all around. Yeah. So no, it's all really good things. And I think it's stuff that I knew originally, but didn't have any idea how to move forward with. Yeah. So having a basis of Yeah, you got to start from scratch. Just kidding.
Start from scratch. And obviously, Mcat Score is going to be a big part of that will open up so many doors for you in the future. So really focusing on how do I improve my Mcat score. You have a ton of great experiences, obviously getting more clinical experience, more shadowing, more recency. Hopefully you've been doing that in the interim. And then really just focusing on telling your story through your application.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much again for joining me on Application Renovation. I hope this was helpful and good luck in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Good luck to everybody else too.
Thanks.